If you grew up in 1960s Britain, you witnessed a decade that completely transformed our nation from post-war austerity into swinging modernity. 10 unforgettable events that shaped who we became. Did you know that whilst you watched England win the World Cup, computer scientists later proved that famous third goal never actually crossed the line? Or did it? But here's the twist about the 60s. Beneath the miniskirts and Beatles mania lurked spy scandals exposing hundreds of agents, trains being robbed with military precision, and weather so catastrophic it killed thousands more than anyone admitted. The stakes were astronomical. Stay with us to remember how one betrayal alone led to dozens of Western agents being executed behind the Iron Curtain. When Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach hit British bookshops in 1961, most parents thought it was absolute rubbish. A story about a boy living inside a massive fruit with talking insects. Publishers Allen and Unwin nearly rejected it, believing British children preferred their traditional Enid Blyton-style adventures. Dahl wrote it while recovering from his wartime injuries. As an RAF pilot, he'd crashed in Libya and suffered severe spinal injuries that plagued him for life. The book was banned in various places over the decades. Wisconsin famously prohibited it in 1999 for depicting spider licking, promoting disobedience, and containing the word ass, referring to the donkey, naturally. British libraries in the 60s worried it was too frightening for children. Those aunts Sponge and Spiker meeting their gruesome end, squashed flat by the peach, didn't sit well with conservative librarians. Dahl later revealed those horrible aunts were inspired by unpleasant adults from his childhood, though he was careful never to name specific individuals for legal reasons. The book's success revolutionized British children's literature, proving that young readers crave darkness and danger alongside their adventures. Publishers suddenly realized children didn't need sanitized stories. They wanted genuine peril and delicious comeuppance for villains. First editions in excellent condition now command prices from £5,000 to £15,000 at auction, though most of our childhood copies probably ended up in church jumble sales alongside our Bunty annuals. George Blake's exposure as a Soviet double agent in 1961 represented British intelligence's darkest hour. This former Dutch resistance fighter who'd survived Nazi captivity had been turned by the KGB and systematically betrayed Western intelligence operations for nearly a decade. While the exact number remains classified, historians estimate he exposed around 400 agents, with dozens subsequently executed by Soviet authorities. The government desperately tried to limit public knowledge, but Blake's confession revealed something even worse. He'd compromised Operation Gold, the Berlin tunnel project that MI6 considered their masterpiece. The tunnel had cost millions, involved cutting-edge technology, and recorded hundreds of thousands of Soviet communications. The Russians, thanks to Blake, knew about it before construction began, feeding disinformation while identifying every Western operative involved. Blake received 42 years, the longest sentence in British legal history then. His 1966 escape from Wormwood Scrubs reads like fiction. An anti-nuclear campaigner named Sean Bourke orchestrated it using a rope ladder reinforced with knitting needles, walkie-talkies hidden in hot water bottles, and a pink chrysanthemum pot as the all-clear signal. But wait, fancy subscribing to hear where Blake ended up? Because his current status is even more extraordinary. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because these Cold War stories get more incredible as we go deeper. Blake reached Moscow via East Germany, where he received a hero's welcome, KGB pension, and Order of Lenin. Now over 100 years old, he's outlived most of his handlers, his enemies, and even the Soviet Union itself. British intelligence periodically discussed elimination options, but concluded that assassinating a centenarian in Moscow would be diplomatically awkward. Dr. No premiered at the London Pavilion on the 5th of October 1962 to mixed reviews. Critics dismissed it as trashy, though audiences immediately embraced this new kind of British hero. The franchise would eventually generate billions in revenue, becoming Britain's most successful cultural export after the Beatles. Sean Connery famously wasn't first choice, or second, third, or fourth. Cary Grant wanted too much money and approval over future scripts. David Niven was deemed too old at 52. Patrick McGoohan turned it down, considering Bond morally reprehensible. Even James Mason and Richard Burton were approached. Connery, earning modest wages from television work, borrowed a suit for his audition. Director Terence Young personally coached him in everything from wine selection to walking in evening wear. The production's shoestring budget of just £392,000 forced creative solutions. The gun barrel sequence was filmed by pointing a camera through an actual rifle barrel. During the tarantula scene, the protective glass between Connery and the spider cracked, leaving him genuinely terrified as the creature crawled across him. Ursula Andress's iconic beach emergence had to be shot repeatedly because she couldn't swim strongly enough to emerge gracefully from the waves. Her voice was completely dubbed by actress Nikki van der Zyl, as Andress's Swiss accent was deemed too strong for audiences. The Jamaica shoot faced constant problems. The crew battled tropical storms, equipment failures in the humidity, and local authorities who kept changing location permissions. The famous scene where Bond kills Professor Dent was controversial even then. Shooting an unarmed man in cold blood shocked censors. Several countries demanded cuts. The 3 blind mice assassins were actually local dancers recruited days before filming when the original actors failed to arrive. Ian Fleming initially despised Connery's casting, preferring his vision of a refined English gentleman. He particularly wanted his neighbour Christopher Lee, who was Fleming's step-cousin and had served in intelligence during the war. After the film's success, Fleming grudgingly created Scottish ancestry for Bond in later novels as a nod to Connery. The film earned £59 million worldwide against its modest budget, saving United Artists from near bankruptcy and establishing Pinewood Studios as the home of blockbuster filmmaking. The Big Freeze began on Boxing Day 1962 with heavy snowfall and didn't release its grip until March 1963. Temperatures plummeted to -22°C in Scotland. The sea froze for miles off the Kent coast, the Thames turned solid for 8 miles, and people ice skated down normally busy rivers. Snowdrifts reached 20 feet in places, burying entire villages. The human cost was severe. Thousands died from cold-related causes, though exact figures vary as many deaths were attributed to other conditions. Elderly people dying from hypothermia were often recorded as natural causes or heart failure. Coal supplies dwindled dangerously, forcing power stations to implement rolling blackouts. The government authorised emergency measures, including using military fuel reserves. This catastrophic winter transformed British building standards. Double glazing shifted from luxury to necessity. Central heating, previously dismissed as American excess, became standard in new builds. The construction industry underwent rapid modernisation, though some methods adopted in haste, particularly certain insulation materials, would create health problems decades later. Television broadcasts were restricted to preserve power, with the BBC reducing transmission hours. Schools closed for weeks, pipes burst in millions of homes, and unemployment soared as construction and transport ground to halt. When spring finally arrived, the flooding from rapid snowmelt caused additional devastation, particularly in Wales and southwest England. The Great Train Robbery of August 8, 1963 saw 15 men steal £2.6 million from the Glasgow to London mail train. The audacity stunned Britain. They'd tampered with signals using basic equipment, overwhelmed the train crew, and made off with 120 mailbags stuffed with used banknotes. The planning took months. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, studied train timetables obsessively and recruited specialists for each role. From Roy James, a racing driver for the Getaway, to Roger Corddry, who handled signal manipulation. They practiced on a mock-up of the train carriage built in a warehouse. The robbery itself took just 46 minutes from stopping the train to departure. They'd calculated everything except human nature. Several gang members couldn't resist spending conspicuously, buying new Jaguars and expensive jewellery that caught police attention. The gang's farmhouse hideout at Leatherslade Farm became legendary for one detail. They played Monopoly with real money from the robbery. Their failure to burn down the farm as planned proved fatal. Fingerprints on the game board and throughout the property led to most arrests. The Metropolitan Police Flying Squad processed over 2,000 fingerprints from the farm. Detective Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler became so obsessed with catching the gang, he didn't take a day off for 5 years, sleeping in his office and eating nothing but sandwiches. The judge handed down 30-year sentences explicitly as deterrence, fearing copycat crimes if punishments seemed lenient. These were unprecedented for robbery. Murderers often received less. Charlie Wilson escaped from Winson Green Prison in 1964, living freely in Montreal for 4 years before recapture. Ronnie Biggs became the robbery's most famous figure, despite being a minor player brought in solely because he knew someone who could drive trains. His escape from prison and decades on the run in Brazil turned him into a folk hero, though fellow gang members resented his celebrity while they served their sentences. The train driver, Jack Mills, suffered head injuries during the robbery and never fully recovered, dying in 1970, though medical evidence suggests his death wasn't directly caused by the assault, despite widespread belief otherwise. The stolen money was never fully recovered. Police found just £343,448, leaving over £2.2 million unaccounted for, presumably hidden or spent. Britain's relationship with capital punishment ended through embarrassing miscarriages of justice rather than moral evolution. Timothy Evans, hanged in 1950 for murders actually committed by John Christie, became the case that changed minds. Derek Bentley's execution in 1953 for a murder committed by his underage accomplice while Bentley was already in police custody further undermined public confidence. The last executions occurred simultaneously at 8 a.m. on the 13th of August 1964. Peter Allen at Liverpool's Walton Prison and Gwyn Owen Evans at Manchester's Strangeways. This synchronisation avoided making either Britain's last executed criminal, Ruth Ellis, hanged in 1955 for shooting her abusive lover, remains the last woman executed in Britain. Parliament voted to suspend capital punishment for murder in 1965 on a trial basis, making it permanent in 1969. Public opinion remained supportive of hanging. Polls showed clear majorities wanted retention for certain crimes. But parliamentarians influenced by evidence of wrongful executions and the disturbing testimonies of former executioners voted against public sentiment. Albert Pierrepoint, Britain's chief executioner who dispatched over 400 people, quit suddenly to run a pub. His autobiography revealed deep doubts about whether execution deterred crime, writing that he'd hanged guilty and innocent alike, and it had achieved nothing except satisfying a primitive urge for revenge. Speaking of revelations that change our understanding of history, wait until you discover what modern analysis reveals about England's World Cup victory. If you're finding these hidden truths fascinating, smash that like button and subscribe, because the sporting scandal coming next will challenge everything you believed about 1966. 30th of July, 1966. Wembley Stadium. England's greatest sporting triumph contained enough controversy to fuel debates for decades. 4 months earlier, the Jules Rimet Trophy vanished from a Westminster exhibition despite security guards. Scotland Yard faced international humiliation until Pickles, a mixed-breed dog, found it wrapped in newspaper under a suburban hedge while on his evening walk. The thief's ransom attempt using newspaper-filled suitcases ended in arrest, though questions remained about possible accomplices. The finals disputed third goal, Geoff Hurst's shot bouncing down from the crossbar, has undergone extensive analysis. Computer modelling by Oxford and German universities suggests the ball didn't fully cross the line. Roger Hunt, the England striker nearest the incident, maintained strategic ambiguity for decades before admitting uncertainty. Soviet linesman Tofik Bakramov gave the goal despite being poorly positioned, later claiming he was certain though language barriers prevented detailed explanation. Kenneth Wolstenholme's immortal commentary, "They think it's all over. It is now," emerged from pure improvisation after his prepared notes disappeared. The BBC nearly didn't broadcast the match, considering the rights too expensive, until intervention from broadcasting house executives who recognised the historic significance. Bobby Moore's muddy hands when receiving the trophy from the Queen created a protocol crisis. She later personally cleaned it, as royal tradition demanded. The original trophy, stolen again in Brazil in 1983 and never recovered, means all subsequent photos show replicas, though FIFA maintains official silence on this embarrassing fact. Concorde's maiden British test flight on the 9th of April 1969 from Filton represented aerospace ambition exceeding financial reality. Development costs spiralled so dramatically that Britain and France spent more on Concorde than America spent reaching the moon. Each aircraft cost twice its selling price to build. Governments literally subsidised every sale. Test pilot Brian Trubshaw's first flight nearly ended catastrophically when the prototype's nose cone mechanism jammed. Manual hydraulic pumping while landing at high speed prevented disaster, though spectators remained unaware how close they'd come to witnessing tragedy. The aircraft's distinctive droop nose, essential for pilot visibility during landing, became its most recognisable feature. Trubshaw's famous first radio message was characteristically British understatement: "She flies beautifully." The engineering challenges were staggering. Concorde's aluminium body expanded by up to 10 inches during supersonic flight due to friction heating. A gap appeared between the flight engineer's console and bulkhead that could hold a hand. Engineers left it as an unofficial storage spot for flight documents. The white paint wasn't aesthetic choice but necessity. Any other colour would have caused dangerous overheating. Windows were tiny because larger ones couldn't withstand the pressure differential at 60,000 feet, twice the altitude of conventional jets. Concorde's sonic boom shattered windows, triggered car alarms miles away, and generated thousands of complaints. Environmental concerns were genuine. It burned more fuel per passenger than any commercial aircraft, producing emissions at altitudes where damage was maximised. American authorities restricted it to overseas routes, partly for environmental reasons, but primarily to protect Boeing's commercial interests. The Soviets rushed their own supersonic transport, the Tu-144, into service first, but it crashed spectacularly at the 1973 Paris Air Show, killing 14 people and effectively ending Soviet supersonic passenger ambitions. Only 20 Concordes were built. British Airways and Air France eventually received their fleets for token payments when governments accepted the programme's commercial failure. The aircraft became profitable only after privatisation, when BA could charge luxury prices to passengers who valued speed and exclusivity over economics. 30 January 1969. The Beatles performed publicly for the final time on Apple Corps' Savile Row rooftop. No announcement preceded it, no tickets were sold, and technically they were breaking several London ordinances. The decision came from desperation to fulfil contractual obligations for a live performance, while the band barely tolerated being together. Police arrived after 42 minutes following complaints from local businesses about noise-disrupting phone calls and meetings. The authorities showed remarkable restraint, allowing completion despite having grounds for immediate shutdown. The performance included multiple takes of songs because tensions and cold weather affected their playing. Billy Preston's keyboard contributions weren't just musical, he functioned as mediator between increasingly hostile band members. John Lennon's closing quip, "I hope we pass the audition," carried bitter irony. The world's biggest band joking about acceptance while actively disintegrating. George Harrison had already quit once during these sessions, returning only after extensive negotiation. The rooftop concert footage, intended for a television special showcasing unity, instead captured 4 individuals who happened to share a history. The location choice was purely practical. They could stop whenever they wanted and wouldn't face a paying audience expecting a full show. Ringo later described it as going to work, lacking any sense of occasion despite its historic significance. Prince Charles's investiture as Prince of Wales at Caernarfon Castle on the 1st of July 1969 mixed medieval pageantry with modern security nightmares. Welsh nationalists conducted a bombing campaign preceding the ceremony. 2 men died when their device detonated prematurely the night before. Security forces intercepted multiple threats, deploying unprecedented protection including marksmen, frogmen searching the harbour, and systematic searches of medieval murder holes. Charles spent a term at Aberystwyth University learning Welsh, where his tutor Edward Millward was a prominent Welsh nationalist who later became a Plaid Cymru MP. This arrangement, intended to demonstrate respect for Welsh culture, placed the heir apparent under instruction from someone philosophically opposed to his position. Charles earned respect by delivering parts of his investiture speech in Welsh, though many nationalists remained unimpressed. The ceremony itself was largely theatrical invention. No ancient traditions were being observed. The choreography was created specifically for television by Lord Snowdon, Princess Margaret's photographer husband. The seemingly ancient regalia included items hastily manufactured for the occasion. The golden coronet, appearing medieval, was created just months before by the Goldsmiths Company. The weight of the coronet caused Charles genuine discomfort, forcing him to keep his head bowed throughout much of the ceremony. Viewers interpreted this as humility or contemplation, unaware he was simply managing neck strain from the unexpected weight. His own diary entries, revealed decades later, describe the entire experience as an ordeal endured rather than celebrated. These 10 events weren't just historical moments frozen in time. They were the catalysts that transformed Britain from monochrome post-war recovery into technicolor modernity. Every frozen pipe in 1963 pushed central heating into British homes, every Beatles chord challenged establishment assumptions, and every frame of that controversial World Cup goal reinforced a mythology we're still debating today. If this journey through the 60s revealed truths hidden behind the mythology, or reminded you of details time had softened, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We're excavating the real stories behind every decade's defining moments, and trust me, what we're uncovering about the 70s will challenge everything you thought you knew. Until next time, keep questioning the official version, because as we've discovered today, the truth is invariably more fascinating than the carefully curated memory.